And she started it. All right, well, let's begin then. Well, hello again, and welcome to the first ULS members online discussion. Like I said, we are recording the session today, and we'll distribute the recording via email later on to everyone that's registered. So my name is Julie Watson. I'm a research librarian at Marywood University in Scranton, PA. And facilitating this discussion with me today are Emily Daly and Rebecca Blackiston. Emily is head of the User Services Department at Duke University, and Rebecca is an instructional services librarian at the University of Arizona, and they're both ULS members at large. Our plan is to offer 2 of these online discussions per year, one in the fall and then one in the spring. And we have a few goals, and the first one is to highlight the interesting work of ULS members, both in their respective libraries and through their ULS committee work. And we also would like to extend the discussions, session topics, and informal conversations that take place at ALA Annual and Midwinter. And then finally, we would like to provide a tangible benefit for ULS members, especially those of you who are not able to regularly attend the conferences. And the topics of the online discussions will vary depending on the interests and expertise of the speakers. Today we're fortunate enough to have with us 4 members of the evidence-based practice discussion group, and they'll be speaking on different aspects of surveys and libraries. First we'll hear from Wendy Begay, librarian of Tohono O'odham Nation, and she'll talk about the importance of actionable surveys to libraries. And then Jason Martin, who's head of public services at Stetson University in Florida, will speak about proper survey construction, including the use of a blueprint and question types. And then Rick Stoddart, assessment librarian at, oh, thank you, somebody's forwarding the slides for me. I forgot to do that. Yes, Rick Stoddart is assessment librarian at Oregon State University. And he's going to talk about the counting options survey as an alternative to LibQual. And then finally, we'll have Lisa Horowitz, who's the assessment librarian at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And she'll discuss her experiences adding a library-related question to a series of campus-wide surveys. And finally, I just want to note that we want our time today to really be a true discussion. So the presenters will be doing their best to interact with each other and with you. And your way to interact with the speakers will be through the chat. So please post your questions in the chat area, and Emily will make sure your questions are answered at the end of each segment. And Rebecca is available to you to help with any technical difficulties you might have. So please ask for her help through a private chat with her so that the group channel is open for posting questions and group interactions. So without any further ado, I will turn the discussion over to Wendy.
Hello. I just want to make sure that people can see me and hear me. Any feedback? Are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, but we can't see you yet.
There we go. You can hear me and see me, right? Okay, let me get started then. Hello everyone, my name is Wendy Begay. I am the librarian and manager at Benito Garcia Library in Sells, Arizona on the Tohono O'odham Nation. We're located about 60 miles west of Tucson. So you may wonder why a tribal librarian is talking to you about surveys in academic libraries. Well, before I took my current position as a tribal librarian, I worked for 12 years in 2 academic libraries at University of Arizona Libraries and Kansas State University Libraries. At both libraries, I coordinated and conducted evaluation and assessment activities, including survey design. So I'm really hopeful that we can share some useful information with you today. So let me click on the next slide. Okay. So let me go over, well, the first thing that I really want to do is to do a quick overview of what I'll be covering, what I'll be talking to you about today. I'll talk about surveys in terms of process improvement, and then I'll talk about how a survey becomes actionable and give you some example, or one example. Finally, I'll finish with some helpful tips when designing your survey. So let's start with process improvement then. At Arizona, I was trained to use Six Sigma approach to process improvement. What is Six Sigma? It's a systematic and disciplined approach to process improvement. It's data-driven and it's customer-focused. Since I have this background, I tend to think about surveys as a tool to gather information in the larger picture. So process improvement is designed for you to take action and with the data that you gather. So this is the background that or the experience that I have. The Six Sigma methodology that I learned and used at the University of Arizona was called DMAIC, D-M-A-I-C. D, define, M, measure, A, analyze, I, implement, C, control. So here's a quick overview of the process improvement parts. And I wanted to show you this to emphasize the actionable parts. The steps are really similar to the research process. So with that, the first thing you usually have is you have a question. You almost always need to define your question to get focus and to gain understanding of your question. Then you'll probably need to find out more information about this question or about this problem and review the data that you already have. Gathering data can be new or existing data, or both. Survey is one of the tools that you can use to gather your data. The tool you use is really dependent on the data that you intend to gather. The next step would be to analyze your data. What changes do you need to make, implement, and then implement the changes? The last part is give feedback or provide summary results to the respondents. This is your opportunity to describe how you intend to respond based on the survey results. So that's the quick overview of the process improvement steps. Let's go on to actionable surveys. So why am I showing the process improvement steps? I want to focus on the two parts that were in blue that makes a survey actionable. Designing or creating your questions and the feedback, those two steps there. So let's dive right into the survey questions part. When you're creating survey questions, you need to always ask, what will we do with the information from the responses? So, for example, say you create a survey question that has a Likert scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Will you be able to act on information that you get if the 60% of the responses say they're neutral on that particular question? What will be your action? You don't have to formulate an entire plan, but you should be able to answer the question, what will we do with the information from the responses? If you don't intend to act on the responses, then re-examine your questions. Are you asking the right questions? Is your question necessary in the data gathering efforts? The last but equally important step is to report the survey results. So this is a step probably that a lot of people don't do. And that this is your opportunity to say what changes you've made for the respondents. This can be done a variety of different ways, including student leadership through student leadership groups. So you should make and take opportunities to declare to your customers, this is what you told us you wanted, and this is what we're delivering. So you're probably wondering, so what does it look like? What does this an actionable survey look like? I happen to have an example of an actionable survey. It's called the Action Gap Survey. This survey actually works really well to assess services. So what you do is you list out 10 services that you would like to assess, maybe from one service desk or some one service point. And then you ask the respondents 3 things, just 3 simple questions. And that is, from this list, choose 3 services that we do well. And then the second question would be, from the same list, choose 3 services that we need to improve. And the last one is quite important. You would ask the respondents which 3 services are most important to you. This is actually a survey designed by Cravenho and Sandvig, about 10 years old. So the survey results analysis could look something like this. So from this chart, then, the yellow indicates what you do best, and the blue indicates what you need to improve. And the black line is actually just the difference between the two, so that's your true performance. So the best part of the survey is the importance to the customer, which is arranged from left to right in order of importance. So if you didn't have this indicator, if you didn't ask this last question, then you might think that you need to focus on 2 things, on 2 services that go below into the blue part here. The 2 services are help finding a computer and also help finding study space. So your natural inclination could be that, oh, you know, those are the 2 that we need to improve the most. But when you actually see how important it is to the customer, it's not so important. One is right in the middle, and the other one, help finding a computer, is not so important to the customer. So it's really important to have this customer importance part so that it might be better for you to focus your efforts on another service, especially if you have limited or dwindling resources. So the last part is survey design tips. So I have this quick tip, quick guide. When I'm asked to assist or review surveys, my standard advice is usually don't try to solve world peace in a survey. So what does that mean? It means keep it simple, keep it focused. If you're assessing service, stick with service. So remember, the longer that your survey is, the survey drop rate will increase. Do ask demographic questions. So of the last slide here, do you think these answers would look different, or if you were not answers, but would your response to this particular survey be different for undergrads or grads? So if yes, then do ask that demographic question. If you can, do meet with your fellow faculty members to discuss, review your data, your methodology, statistics department or sociology department, or they have think tanks also. This is what I did when I was at Kansas State University Libraries. And again, if for any big changes in services or products that you have that you're going to make in your library, you should check and consult with other customer data sets. Is it saying the same thing? Don't base big changes just on one survey, the survey results. So that's the end of my presentation for the actionable part. I just want to see if there were any questions before we move on to Dr. Martin.
We do have a couple of questions here, Wendy, that I'll ask now. One is a question about the ideal number of questions per survey. Do you have a rule of thumb for how many questions folks should ask in a single survey?
There isn't any magic formula or silver bullet in creating or designing survey questions. Again, it goes back to that first part, that first question of defining what your question is or defining what the problem is that you're trying to answer. So, 3 might do it, or maybe 5, 7 might do it. So again, you just need to be recognize that the longer that your survey is, that drop rate will increase.
Mm-hmm. And what's your rule of thumb about length of survey in terms of minutes? What is your ideal response time?
It probably should not take no longer than 10 minutes. 5-10 minutes is mm-hmm. good.
Okay. And we have another question here. What is the best way to analyze the Likert type responses as categories, ranks, continuous values? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Let's see. I actually like to take each of the parts. So say if you have the scale from strongly disagree to strongly agree, and then see where do the percentages lie, and then do so I guess it is a rank of say 60% say answered in the neutral. Does that mean anything to me? Probably. I mean, if you design your questions well, then it should say something. Even the neutrals should say something, and it probably will point to something like that you actually need to concentrate or refine that question within a focus group or qualitatively.
Great, and I hope folks are seeing that Lisa and Rick are chiming in on Wendy's responses too in the chat. So you can look down below for a few other thoughts there. And one last question, Wendy, and then we'll wrap up, and that is, what are your recommendations for getting this information out? You said that it's really important to make sure our respondents are aware of the feedback that we've received and how we've responded. What are some tips for getting that information out?
One of the really useful ways now, most libraries have this, is the monitors that you have to advertise or to give information, emergency broadcasts, etc. One of the ways that you can get the word out is, say, like the responses from one of the survey questions. Just display it. Like we asked this in a survey question, and this was your response. Like maybe gear it towards undergrads or grads, but do take opportunities to give information back, and usually you can do this through the student leadership groups, through the say like graduate council, student council, and then also if there's any sort of information or gathering, then you can take that opportunity. So that's what I mean by make and take opportunities to take this back to the people who took the survey. So it's easier for you when you actually start to do another survey, or maybe you're doing the next iteration and say, this is what you told us the last time, and this is actually a survey that we use to make decisions, to make changes to services or products.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you very much, Wendy. Mm-hmm. I think we will wrap up there, and if you have other questions, audience members, please by all means hold those, and we'll have a little bit of time left at the end. And Jason, if you'd like to take it away, you're up next. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
All right. Hopefully everybody can hear and see me. My name is Jason Martin, and I am from Stetson University here in sunny DeLand, Florida. And I'm talking to you a little bit about survey design and question writing, in some ways to, as Wendy said, to keep it simple and keep it focused, and to make sure you're able to use the information that you have gathered. So first I'd like to start off, what are some of your experiences you've had with bad surveys, and what made them bad? If you can just type in your answer into the question or the chat box there. Didn't understand the questions, too long, confusing, yeah, it's a lot of too long, and that is a big problem with surveys. I think maybe one of the first, maybe the first survey that I made was entirely too long, and it kind of meandered and just sort of went everywhere, wherever my mind happened to go as I was writing questions. And that might not be something as a respondent that you would notice, but to you as a data gatherer, to have a survey that's not focused, that kind of meanders, is bad for you because you don't get the type of information that you need. And one of the ways that we can really help that and to focus our survey is to use a survey blueprint. And what this blueprint does is, we decide what it is that we want to know, and then we take a theoretical model or a framework and apply it to that subject, and that helps us break down into the component parts and know what we can ask and how many questions we want to ask. So I put together a couple of examples to show you what I mean. So this is information literacy. So let's say we were going to create a questionnaire survey and to find out how information literate our students are. Here are the 5 standards of information literacy. And then we have it broken down into how many questions we want to ask for each standard, for a total of 15 questions. And so our real focus in this particular survey would be how well our students access and evaluate information, not necessarily some of the other areas about how they're going to use information. So we're going to focus our questions 6 and 4 in those 2 areas of access and evaluate, and just a couple in those other areas. Here's another one. This is on customer satisfaction. This is a customer satisfaction model. And so again, we're more concerned with the perceived value and our patron satisfaction than we are with some of the other areas of customer satisfaction, so we'd focus our questions in those 2 areas. And then finally here, let's just say we wanted to see how well our access services are doing. We could look at the different areas of access services and ask questions based on friendliness, efficiency, and effectiveness. And once we have this blueprint in place, what this then allows us to do is to create questions that speak to those particular categories and the number of questions. Like I said, it helps us to keep from meandering off and saying we could come up with 15, 20 questions about friendliness, but do we really want those many questions? This keeps us on target and keeps us focused on what we're trying to accomplish and what we're trying to learn. And then the next important part is writing the questions. I know some of you talked about, well, they had questions that didn't apply to you, or there was too many open-ended questions or whatnot, and we'll talk about some of that as we move along. And we're just going to talk about some of the more common survey questions that we have. And first is a Likert scale. I say Likert, some people say Likert. My stats professor said a Likert, so I call it a Likert. So the first thing I'm going to ask is a poll question here, and hopefully everybody can see this poll question. But which number of values is going to give you a more accurate, consistent information on a Likert scale? Is it going to be 5 values or 10 values? So just pop in your answer there, what you think is going to give you the best, sort of more accurate responses. All right, looks like we're coming up against a big old blowout here, and everybody seems to be going with the 5 values, and that's correct. I'm just going to go ahead and end this poll right quick here. 5 values is going to give us more accurate information because these Likert scales are what are called vague quantifiers. And what that means is there's not any sort of standard difference between a 5 and a 4 or a 9 and an 8. It depends on our mood, how we're feeling at that particular time, and how if our mood changes, we can answer questions differently. So always stick with the fewer options when it comes to a Likert scale. One other thing you often see neither agree nor disagree, and Wendy talked a little bit about the neutral options. And you have to really ask yourself if that's going to have a value for you. Sometimes it does have a value to have a neutral option, but sometimes it doesn't. So again, it makes sense to say, is this going to have a value to me? If it doesn't, then there's no need to include that as one of your answers. If I asked you if this webinar was interesting and 75% said neither agree nor disagree, I don't know that that tells me too much about this webinar. Now, of course, that's different than the NA or non-applicable version, which simply doesn't apply to me. And I don't know, Lisa, he doesn't have an opinion on something. Yeah, and I could see if there was something that you were going to ask that people wouldn't have an opinion on. I have an opinion on everything, even things I don't know anything about. So it's kind of hard for me to understand how people don't have opinions on something. But maybe a non-applicable covers that better than the neutral version of that. But again, that's up to you as you're creating your survey. Is this going to have a value for me? And it's something that may or may not. Open-ended questions. Somebody said that they took a survey that had too many open-ended questions, and I've opened up surveys that were like a comprehensive exam, all these open-ended questions, and that's a lot of work to go through. You can get answers that are a couple of words or answers that are a couple of paragraphs. It all depends. So I like to just save it as a good catch-all at the end of something, just in case there's anything that I missed that somebody wants to tell me about or talk to me about. Check all that apply. That's another one that can be overused. If you have a long list of check all that applies and you have a lot of those, primacy effect can take over, which is where people just start to focus on the first 4 or 5 options and not the last part of the list, so those will get over-selected in your survey responses. Okay. Drop-down menus, make sure that all the options are present. Somebody said that they've had options that weren't there, they wanted to select, so it's always a good idea to put an other option there and allow people to put in their own responses. And the continuum of data, when you're asking demographic questions, how long have you worked at your library, you want to make sure that each set there is a distinct set. Bullet point 2 has overlaps on it versus bullet point 3, which are distinct sets. So a person clearly knows which to answer when they've asked them, say, how long you've worked at the library or how often you visit the library. Okay. Another poll question here. All right, just take a moment to answer this question really quick. Epistemologically speaking, the library plays both a latent and manifest role vis-a-vis online pedagogy. Okay. And I wrote this question, and I also have no idea what this means. We all work in academia, and we know people who speak like this, but we don't want to write survey questions like this, because it's confusing to our respondents. We want to use clear and concise language, and we want to make sure that we don't leave any words or phrases open to interpretation so we get good answers from our respondents. All right, I think this is the last poll question here. So coffee shop is not a good use of library space. And this is an example of a negative question where if you want to answer in the positive, you have to answer in the negative. And this does a couple of things. One, it confuses the people who are answering the question. They might even see the not that's in there, and so they might answer in a different way. And it also really skews your results when you go through and you want to analyze your data, that you've got this data set that's out here in the 1s and 2s when everything else maybe is in the 4s and 5s. It can really mess you up when you gather your data. Don't be too specific. Don't make people go and look for information. A lot of times they might go and have to open up some files to go to look for something. They just think this is maybe more work than it's worth to answer this survey. Okay. Again, clear navigational flow, avoid clutter. That's easy, I think, with online surveys, but if you are going to do a paper survey, make sure people know that there's questions on the back or there's another sheet of questions. Avoid jumping around from question type to question type. People have to think about, how do I answer this question? Is it a Likert scale? Is it a multiple choice? Is it check all that apply? That can be confusing to respondents, and they might just answer in the wrong way. And I've always been taught to place the demographic information at the end. People are more vested in the survey and they'll answer it that way, although some people swear by placing it in the beginning. So that can be something that's up to your own personal opinion. Okay. Any questions about that?
Jason, we do have a couple of questions here. So you mentioned, or someone asked about patrons who are over-surveyed, wondering what's in it for them. And then, of course, that led to thinking about drawings or incentives. We had one participant say that his supervisor suspects that incentives muddy the value of the survey results and wondered if there might be any research on that. And I wanted to mention that Rick did post a study that was done at his institution. But Jason, do you have thoughts about incentives?
Yeah, one thing you have to be careful of with incentives. I used to work at a state university, and it was actually here in Florida. It was actually considered a lottery to offer incentives, or maybe it was, if you participate, you could win an Amazon gift card. Everybody that participated had to get the same thing, or it was considered a lottery and it violated state law. Those can't. Anything you're talking about when you talk about a lot of these surveys, there is, that self-selecting that people that are maybe more into something or have more of an opinion to give are going to answer the survey versus people who are a different personality type. That's always going to be a problem. I think that's always a good reason why you would want to have a good sample size, a good, statistically significant sample size, and get a good response rate from there. That kind of helps balance that out and eliminate some of that selection bias or answering bias.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, folks? The chat was really active during your segment, Jason. Are there any other questions folks would like to propose before we move on? Or pose, I should say. Anything else? Okay, then with that, we will move on to our next presenter. Thanks, Jason.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear. Pardon me. I hope you can hear me. My name's Rick Stoddard, and I'm the assessment librarian at Oregon State University's Libraries and Press. Jason and Wendy have talked about creating actionable surveys and having good survey design. The next two speakers, myself and Lisa, are going to talk about using existing surveys. I'm going to talk about looking at using the LibSat tool from Counting Opinions, which is a library satisfaction, gathers feedback from your patrons. Most of us have heard of LibQual or something similar to that, but I wanted to get a sense of what people may be using at their libraries. And so I'm going to see if I can get this poll question to load. And so what tool does your library use? Have you used a LibQual product, LibSat, a survey built in-house? Your library doesn't gather information, or do you use some other tool? And it looks like a lot of you are have used LibQual at one point. And the other big one here looks like that people have built a survey in-house. And so I'm going to end that poll really quickly. I just wanted to get a sense of what people were using. I can hide this real quick. And so regarding that, regarding those the different types available to you, here's just some broad characteristics related to those. LibQual is a great tool, and many of us are familiar with it or seen it in the library literature. This gives you a really comprehensive snapshot of what's going on in your library. One of the challenges often with LibQual, depending on which part of LibQual you're using, it can be really complex, both for the user to take that survey as also for you to interpret it. But one of the good things regarding that complexity is that you know that some good survey design has been put into that for the reliability and validity of those results. You're able to compare with your peers with that have also used LibQual, because many people have been LibQual customers. We're using the Counting Opinions LibSat tool in our library. I think what's interesting about this, that I like about this, that it's ongoing. While LibQual gives you a snapshot, the Counting Opinions tool, the LibSat tool, sits on our website, and we can compare results month to month. And so if we make a change, if we decide to make a change based on the survey data, we can track what sort of actions have resulted from that. I think one of the other good parts of LibSat that I think is important, is probably the main point of my talk, is when you're designing a survey, you really need to think about how you're going to, as Wendy talked about, making the data actionable. And so LibSat provides some really interesting reports and graphics and analysis that can help make the data actionable for you. And if you use a homegrown survey, which is really many of us can do, you have fuller control of the questions. But one of the things to think about is, are you actually measuring what you're intending to measure? And if you have any interest in benchmarking or comparing to your peers, no one else is using that particular survey tool that you're using, and so it becomes hard to then benchmark with others if that's an interest of yours. And so I'm going to talk about LibSat, but I wanted to give you the overview of Counting Opinions. Basically, when you use Counting Opinions, you get 3 products or 3 tools. LibSat is a library satisfaction survey. There's a long form and a short form, and the patrons can choose whichever one they'd like to use. Inform Us is basically, it's a form that you can, generator, kind of like Google Forms, in a way that will gather data for you. You can use that internally to gather statistics from others in the library, but you can also use it to create some surveys themselves. And LibPass is kind of the overarching place where all the data resides, and you can also report that, use it for reporting purposes. I will say that I'm not a salesman for Counting Opinions. I'm just talking basically on our experience this past year with the product. LibSat's ready to go out of the box. Pretty much you need a little bit of tweaking of the questions, but otherwise you can get that up and going right away. Inform Us and LibPass there is a learning curve to those and some time investment, and so it takes a little bit of more time to get familiar with those particular aspects of the tool. And so I'm going to mainly focus on the LibSat survey because this is about surveys. And so what we've done is we've just deployed it as a link on the website, or as a sidebar link on the website for patrons to click on. So right now it's pretty passive, but I think one of the great things that Counting Opinions does is it provides some other ways for you to promote the tool. They have a peel down corner on your website that makes it a kind of pokes people to maybe take the survey, and we're going to use that next. But I think it's an interesting way to have the survey up continuously, because you can compare changes, as I mentioned, as they happen. You can do this with your own particular tool if you wanted to construct something in a Google form or Qualtrics or something else and put the link up. But again, as I mentioned, having the ability to make the data immediately actionable through reporting, I think, is one of the cool things about using something perhaps created from a vendor or somewhere else. And so some of those, what that looks like, one of the tools that Counting Opinions provides is what they call the Squire Index. And so it stands for satisfaction, quality, usage, importance, recommendation, and expectation. And this is kind of like Wendy was talking about, and also mapping, and Jason was talking about mapping your questions to particular areas. And so they've already done the mapping for you. And so I can compare these, I can share this sort of graphic with library administration. We can look month to month how things are going on and compare it to yearly overall. And so I think this is a really quick snapshot that provides some really interesting data that you can talk about with library administrators. One of the really cool parts I think that I really like is the opportunity index that it provides. So what this talks about, and Wendy touched on, is it ranks questions by importance. So in this particular instance, patrons have suggested that they rank seating in the library as being very important, but their satisfaction with that is not as important, or their satisfaction is down. And so there's a gap there that we probably need to pay attention to. Where something further down the list maybe is not ranked as important, and so it's not our priority to look at that particular time. And so this is really interesting, is because then we could look, okay, was this happening during finals when the library was overwhelmed with people, or is this our overall rating that we really need to look at how to improve the library seating and make some immediate changes to seating to increase the satisfaction of what's going on in the library. I think that what's really great about this is that it's this kind of, when you use a vendor survey, you have the whole package. You have not only good survey design, but you also, in general, hopefully get good reporting. And I think that's one thing to think about when you're on your own creating a survey by yourself, about how you're reporting and using the data and making it actionable. And so that's my brief piece about vendor surveys and the LibStat counting opinions. Lisa's going to talk to you next about leveraging existing surveys on your campus, but I want to see if there's any questions that people have. And I know I ran through that really quick, but I want to respect your time.
Rick, that was really helpful, and we do have a couple of questions, in fact. Again, the chat was pretty active, so I'll hope that I've captured all of these, and please feel free to chat in or speak up, folks, if you have other questions. But you mentioned that it's difficult sometimes for institutions to ensure reliability and validity for surveys they develop in-house. Mm-hmm. Do you have any suggestions for ways they can ensure that reliability and validity?
Definitely, and I think Wendy touched on this in the beginning. Is on our campus we have a survey office that the statistics department uses as a product that they do to our community and other researchers. And I think running your particular surveys through either, if you have a department of statistics or sociology, we have a research office, we're a bigger university, have a research office on campus. I think there are places on campus to make connections to tap into expertise to help look at those sort of things to help with the validity and reliability. I think a lot of testing your survey too is important, not just doing some beta testing of your survey is also an important way to do that.
Sure. And then you might see that a few just came into the chat. So Nancy asks about the opportunity index and wonders if it takes a higher number of respondents into account because the seating chart had only 22 respondents.
Yeah, and I think we can. It does. It looks like it does base it on the number of respondents as well as the importance. So yeah, I think that the number of respondents is part of what they figure out for the index. I don't have the secret. I'm not behind the scenes on the exact way that they figure that, but it does seem that the number of respondents is a factor.
Sure. And then what about cost, approximate cost for the tools that you mentioned? Do you have any idea based on FTE? Or
I can't answer that off the top of the top of my head. What we were doing is we compared the cost of counting opinions to running LibQual again, and we decided to take the money for LibQual and to use it for counting opinions. And so, at least at our institution, it was comparable to try that. So we're trying that out for a year in lieu of LibQual, or 2 years in lieu of LibQual.
And then back to one of the earlier comments, someone mentioned that it's difficult to design questions that are specific enough to be actionable. And I wonder, Rick, if you feel things like the LibQual or counting opinions tools do a better job of creating questions that lead to actionable results.
I would say in some ways they do, because that they put a lot of time and effort into that, and I think it's the way that the questions are mapped to. Multiple questions are getting at the same topic or same thing of interest. So I think that they can be, but I think it depends on how specific you need your questions at your university. If you're asking about something really specific that you want to know feedback on, they're not necessarily going to be able to drill down to that level unless you work on adding questions to that particular instrument. Sure.
And then back to cost, Sandra wonders if the Counting Opinions tool is a subscription-based service rather than a purchase.
It is a subscription-based service, yes.
Okay, so I hope that helps, Sandra. And then just one last question, again, just based on the comments in the chat box. We were talking a little bit about the process of developing your own in-house survey leading to further investigation or discussion as a way of taking action on some of these questions. And I wondered if you have thoughts about the process of developing a survey in-house, and if you think that that actual process of developing the tool itself leads to staff who are perhaps more engaged, invested, and maybe more likely to act on survey results.
Yeah, I think it has. I mean, I can think of an example where I was working with the circulation department and looking at our laptop lending. And I think going through the process of not only helping create the questions with them, but talking about how to best deploy the survey and then going over the results with them, they've been more engaged about looking for feedback regarding their services. So I think that it is worthwhile to be collaborative in the process when you're developing a survey, and I think there is a lot of goodwill and that's generated from that.
Great. Thank you very much, Rick. I think we will have to wrap up there and move on to Lisa. Lisa, take it away, and thank you again, Rick.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Horowitz. I'm the assessment librarian at the MIT Libraries. And I'm going to also start with a poll. And let's see. This is a pretty generic poll. Has your library had questions included on campus-wide surveys? And looks like it's about 2/3 to 1/3, which is not so surprising. So of those people who have had surveys with library questions in them, the question is, what was it related to? Was it satisfaction? Was it about services? Was it about spaces? Impact on student learning? So what kinds of questions? So many people on their library surveys asked about satisfaction with library services or satisfaction with spaces, and there are some people who are trying out some other things too. I'm specifically going to talk about library impact on student learning. And what I'm trying to do is share with you some experiences that we've had, while at the same time give you some things to take away so that you know what kinds of obstacles there are or challenges there are into embedding a library question onto a generically standardized survey. So there were 3 of us who decided this was worthwhile, and we created a pilot project with a single learning outcome because we had none. We didn't have an instruction plan. We didn't have anything. At MIT, there isn't an English composition class that everybody takes, but I guess it won't surprise you to know that there are many science classes. There are 2 chemistry classes that most students choose between, and one of them has a very deeply embedded program in, it's a library instruction program. Sorry, it has a deeply embedded library instruction program, and that was one of the people who worked with us. So we were basing ourselves using the ACRL standards from the science and technology section, and this first standard, they've changed a little over time. This began in 2007, so you may see that some of the wording is different from in the past. But under that standard that's listed on the screen here, there was a bullet that said, as a result of a session in which those outcomes are taught, the information literate student is able to apply information access skills learned in one subject area to another. And that led to our outcome regarding lifelong learning skills. And so you can see what our outcome is there, that our hope was that undergrads would be able to employ information access skills that they could use from this class to apply to their lives, both in their field and outside of their field. So, oh, sorry, I messed up. See, I knew there were things happening that I couldn't tell about. Okay, sorry. Now everyone should be able to see me, right? wanted to talk a lot about the process. That was what my goal was here, is to talk about the process. And the process are things that you may decide to do in your own institution. So to begin with, we work with the Office of Institutional Research, and they're the people who administer the surveys. We use a survey instrument that's provided by an organization called COFI, and COFI is the Consortium on Financing Higher Education. There are about 30 institutions that belong, but the survey instruments are very similar to those used on the National Survey on Student Engagement, so they may be familiar. That kind of survey is familiar to you. And we have 4 different surveys that are done that are based on this instrument, as well as the libraries does its own survey. So here are some of the issues. COFI's instrument already includes, as we just found out, many people have a survey on campus that includes a library question. But the question that it includes is about satisfaction with facilities and services. And since we were going for the impact of library instruction, that didn't really meet our needs. So that was a problem because it came to a question of real estate. If we already have a library question, are we really legitimately allowed to ask for more real estate for another library question? And so what we had to do was go to the Office of Institutional Research and justify or rationalize ourselves for our need for an extra question, and the office has to balance that with other stakeholders' needs. We were lucky to be able to negotiate a single question that was part of the custom questions, and we were able to include it on the 2009 alumni survey, the 2010 and 2012 senior surveys, and the 2011 enrolled student survey. We never had this question on the pre-freshman survey, and the 2013 enrolled student survey had too many stakeholders involved, so we were unable to do that one either also. So where we're going from here is, I don't know why that's blank. Let's see. What question do we want to include in the MIT surveys? Well, first remember, this was the learning outcome that we were working from, and that's where we begin. I mean, we talked about it in some of these other, Jason sort of mentioned it, certainly Rick mentioned it when he said you want to valid questions, and in terms of designing questions that make sense, and having Wendy talk about questions that make sense, we had to work with not only the 3 of us, but there was also the Associate Director for Public Services and the Associate Director for the Office of Institutional Research, who had to join us in trying to figure out what wording would work. And really, we only had one question to try to address one thing, and that was a big deal. So the second thing is that the question, this comes back aside from real estate. I'm sorry, I think that the other chatting that's happening is distracting me, and I apologize for it. We didn't get to practice like this. The other side of this is that aside from real estate, the way that the survey works, the way that the instrument works, is that we're not actually allowed to add any questions into the standardized instrument. We could only add questions to the end of the standardized instrument. So the question that we wanted to add to, remember we were looking at lifelong learning, the question that we really wanted to ask about was, there was a question that said, here are some abilities and some types of knowledge that could be developed in a bachelor's degree program. Please indicate how your abilities in these areas has changed over since you first entered college. And there were things like writing clearly and effectively, thinking critically, creating original ideas and solutions, that kind of thing. And that seemed very much like the question that we ended up with, which was, it's not going to show me, so you don't get to see the question. I don't know where it went. Maybe it's on the next slide. There it is. The question that we ended up asking was, based on what you know now, how well do you think your undergraduate experience prepared you to? And that was not only a different section of the survey, it was asked a different way. The first question had a 4-point scale. Our question was in a section that had a 5-point scale. And the question, our response, select scholarly or professional information from a variety of sources, was placed with a number of other questions about professional information, such as starting a company or making firm decisions and taking action, even if some of the facts are not clear. So what we ended up losing from adding to the survey was that we couldn't compare to the kind of data we wanted exactly. It wasn't a parallel data comparison. But we did get some results, and here are just a sampling of results, and this is just so you can see what we've done with it. These are correlations from 2 surveys, and as you can see, as the Pearson coefficient, as that goes up, the 2 variables are more closely linked together. But what we had wanted to do was try to find real tight links between things like the very bottom one on here, gain in-depth knowledge of a field, and our correlation is actually much weaker than we expected it to be. So what we're doing now is this better, Annette? I don't know if I moved away. What we're considering now is how best to proceed. We have a new instruction plan with 4 learning outcomes. Oh, I feel bad now. We have a new instruction plan with 4 learning outcomes, and we're trying to figure out if this is our best question anymore for our purposes. Have we learned anything from doing any of these correlations? Have we shown that we have an impact on student lifelong learning? If we haven't shown that, what other data could it possibly have shown us? And we have another one coming up in 2014, the 2014 senior survey. Let's see if that works. The 2014 senior survey is coming up, and we need to figure out if we have a new question for that. So that was what I was going to share. I really wanted to have, I'm sorry that I had so many technical problems, and I apologize for that. Feel free to ask me about anything. What I'm hoping is that I've provided some points of information that you can pull away and do your own thing with and in your own surveys. So let me move to the next slide, and feel free to ask questions.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. And I didn't see any questions in the chat box, but feel free now, folks, if you have general questions, and actually 1 or 2 might be coming in now. But let's take just another minute for general questions, and then we'll hand things back to Julie to wrap us up. And thank you to our presenters for a really full, engaging hour. I don't think we have any questions at this point. So, actually we do. We have one. So Lisa, this is a question for you. For the coefficient, with what were you comparing each question?
Oh, what we did is we took I said that there was a set of answers that we wanted to compare ourselves to, and then there was the set of answers against which that was where we were put the custom questions. So we used all the responses from that first question, as well as the responses from that second question, to try to get a sense of what our variables were similar, which variables were similar to ours. We did find things like we were not at all correlated with maintaining a healthy lifestyle. So that was the kind of thing that we were trying to show.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you, Lisa. And I think we'll end there with questions. And Julie, if you want to wrap us up, that would be great.
Yeah, no, I don't know if I'll get cut off or not here because we're very close to the end. So if I do, I apologize. But on behalf, I want to thank the presenters. First of all, you shared wonderful information, and I thank you for your expertise. And just then on behalf of ULS, the membership committee, the evidence-based practice committee, and those of us here facilitating this and presenting this, thank you so much for joining. We do have a short little assessment that we'd like you to fill out, and Rebecca has been pushing the link to you, and we will email that to you as well. And we'll also email you the recording. So look in your inbox for that. And then I just want to share with you that we have our second online discussion lined up for March 3rd. That's a Monday. It's going to be 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll be hearing from Liz Zitron of the Academic Outreach Committee. And she'll be leading a discussion on intentional and on-the-fly outreach. And she does blog at theoutreachlibrarian.com, so you can check her out there. And just watch the ULS Listserv blog and Facebook page for that. And then also, if you'll be in Philadelphia for Midwinter this January, check out the ULS events going on there. You can follow the link here on the end of this slide, or you can just search the conference scheduler for ULS. So that is our time, and I think I did it. So thanks again for joining us, and have a great week.